The Puma Fast R2 was one of my personal favorite racing shoes of 2024, but it had a big problem. It was heavy. So for 2025, Puma has managed to shave off over 2 ounces of weight, but did they cut too much? It's time to lace up the Fast R3 and take it for a run. Yo, what's going on? My name is Kafuzi and I'm an athlete runner who reviews running shoes here on YouTube. And today I want to talk to you guys about the all new Puma Fast R3. But before I give you my thoughts on this shoe, I do want to go over some disclosures. This is a pair of shoes that Puma provided to me for the purpose of review, so I didn't have to pay for these shoes. However, nobody's paying me to make this video or to include their brand in this video, and no one's going to get a chance to preview any of my footage or my thoughts before you guys get a chance to see this video on YouTube. So with that disclosure out of the way, let's talk about the Puma Fast R3 and let's start with the specs. I think the headline number, although I normally save this for the last thing that I talk about in specs, is that we got to talk about the weight. This shoe has been stripped down considerably from the last version. The last version came in closer to 9 ounces and the new version comes in at 170 grams or just 5.9 ounces. So it's lost an incredible amount of weight. And how did they do that here? They still have 40 millimeters of stack height in the heel in this shoe, and it's an 8 millimeter drop, meaning you got 32 millimeters of stack height in the forefoot. And in this shoe, we have Nitro Elite Foam, which I believe is the same formula of Nitro Elite Foam aliphatic TPU that they use in the Fast R2. There is a carbon fiber plate in here and you can see it on the bottom of the shoe just like you could last year. But last year's carbon fiber plate was free floating. It was kind of suspended in between the disarticulated heel and forefoot. And we still kind of have that similar concept here, but the two parts are technically connected and there is foam on top of the carbon fiber plate instead of it being free floating like last year. And what this I think enables Puma to do from an engineering perspective is that the plate doesn't have to be as strong or I guess break resistant. Like let's say a rock got in there and you landed on it funny. You don't have to worry as much about the carbon plate shattering from accidental impact with something. And that piece of carbon isn't being asked to carry as much of the forces in between the forefoot and the heel in the shoe. And so you can get away with using a thinner, in other words, lighter piece of carbon fiber. And I do believe that the carbon plate is a little bit thinner in the Fast R3. Now, the shoe still has that underbite that the Fast R2 introduced. That's that little lip of carbon fiber that peeks out underneath the front of your shoe. And I think in a large part it is cosmetic. It's kind of a design flourish that Puma is using. But I do think that there is some functional aspect to it as well. Personally, I don't know if it's a placebo effect or real or not, but I feel like when I'm really trying to get on the toes, I feel like I have just a little bit more lever to push off of and get a little bit more out of each stride. Now on the outsole, that's where we see a lot of changes between last year and this year. Last year's outsole was super thick, like almost daily trainer thick, lots of rubber and lots of deep treads that were in the shoe. This year we have almost like a racing slick. There are some cutouts in the rubber that give this outsole a little bit of bite, and there are some etchings in the rubber that help aid with the traction as well, but it's a very different, very thin, trimmed down outsole. Moving to the upper, that's where we see a lot of changes to the design and functionality of this shoe. Gone is anything that didn't matter in the Fast R2. The tail fin, which was a design flourish meant to kind of tie together the Puma lineup from last year, that's gone. The knit, which I personally do love knit materials even in race product, but that's all gone. And even the material that they used for the non-knit portions of the upper, the portions that were supposed to be a little bit lighter and more race specific, even that's been switched out to a basically transparent layer of very thin but very strong upper material in the Fast R3. So they've trimmed out basically everything you don't need, but that doesn't mean it's a basic upper. It's a very race specific upper. And this is definitely one of those situations where the simpler you want to make a thing, the harder it is to pull that off. But I do think they achieved it really well. I went true to size in my regular running shoe size in the Fast R3, and I think that works really well for me. It is racer snug, but it isn't crunching my toes. I did have a little bit of issue with this wafer thin, almost rice paper like tongue that was here. It takes a lot of fidgeting to get it to sit down correctly without folding over itself and creating some unintentional potential chafing points. But once you get it to sit down, it stays down and it gets out of the way. Now that we talked about what the shoe is like on paper, let's talk about what it's like on the road. The Puma Fast R3 stripped away everything that wasn't necessary in the prior version and kept all of the good stuff. It's still a powerful shoe for stomping on that forefoot and leaping forward with giant loping strides. So if you're a forefoot striker that takes big strides, this is definitely the type of shoe for you, just as the Fast R2 was probably a shoe that you had a lot of fun with. I've been loving Nitro Elite foam, the aliphatic TPU version of Nitro Elite that Puma has been making. It has such a lovely compression decompression pattern when it comes to moving at faster speeds, like up to marathon effort and even faster than that. And the Fast R3 maintains that lovely response as well. It's soft without being mushy. It's responsive without being firm. It's kind of like a Goldilocks foam for me, and it also lasts a really long time. Not only in terms of overall mileage, but also within a single run as well. There isn't foam fade that happens as you're getting deep into the later miles of a long run. And I really enjoyed that it feels like the carbon is doing a lot of work here. Lately, it seems like a lot of carbon plated racers are using their carbon just to stabilize super foams that might otherwise feel a little bit too mushy at race speeds. But not only is the carbon plate doing that here, but it's also providing that like springiness when you're loading it and letting it pop with each step. It has that really fun super shoe feel to it from not only the foam, but from the carbon plate as well. I don't know if it's that underbite that helps it do that. I don't know if it's the grooves and the engineering that went into the carbon fiber plate that does it. I just feel like I'm really getting the sense that there's a carbon pop to this shoe that I find so enjoyable when I'm trying to get up to race efforts. It is definitely a forefoot striker's shoe in my opinion. And for me, there's kind of an awkward transition point in the shoe. And that's when I'm kind of going slower than marathon effort and getting kind of into some up tempo runs. Maybe I'm doing a progression run where I might be landing a little bit more midfoot and forefoot at the same time. And I feel like when I'm doing that, I don't think I'm getting everything out of the shoe. I don't think I'm loading the carbon quite as well as when I'm only landing on the forefoot or predominantly landing on the forefoot. And so I feel like at some of those like faster than easy, but not quite as fast as marathon effort types of paces, I feel like the shoe is kind of like a little bit on the uncomfortable side. It's not really working at its best. But once I get closer to marathon effort and anything that's even faster than that, that's where I'm landing more cleanly on that forefoot, loading that carbon as it's intended and letting everything pop off at the same time, both the carbon and the foam. It's just a really nice sensation that feels like it's singing. And I'm getting a really nice positive feedback whenever I feel like I'm running with good mechanics and the foot strike is clean. Now, I did take this shoe out for a variety of paces and durations, but I find that this shoe is great for anything from moderate all the way up to as fast as you're willing to take it, because the shoe at the end of the day is still really light. So if there's ever a time that you're trying to go fast, I feel like the Fast R3 is going to be a pretty fun option. And I did get a chance to test it in some very wet conditions. It wasn't pouring rain, but it had been raining for quite a bit of time steadily. And I was worried that with this new tread pattern, or the lack of tread pattern in the Fast R3, that I might have some issues, but making some turns on wet pavement, even hitting some of the road paint, all seemed fine for me. So I'm very impressed with the Puma grip and how much they're doing with so little. Before we wrap up the video, let's take a moment to zoom out and see where the Fast R3 fits within the broader Puma lineup. Now, whenever I take a look at a running brand, I always like to start with the daily trainer. And from Puma, that's the Velocity. This is the Velocity Nitro 3. This is a shoe that uses some nitro foam, not Nitro Elite, but regular nitro foam, a supercritical foam, and then an EVA base layer underneath it to provide a comfortable everyday experience. Plus, it's got a lot of tread on the bottom and a very well-built upper, so that way it can handle all of the mileage that you're gonna put into it. Now, if you want to go a little bit faster, that's where the race day shoe comes in. That's where a shoe like the Fast R3 comes in. And this could be a pretty fun 2-shoe rotation if you only want to have 2 shoes, your everyday shoe and your race shoe. But sometimes people don't want to be in their super aggressive race shoe every day, but they want something that's a little bit speedier than what their daily trainer might be able to provide. And that's where a tempo shoe comes in. And from Puma, that is the Deviate 3. And this has an upgraded foam, something that's a little bit more race oriented than what you're finding in the Velocity 3. It does have a plate in it as well. And so it has race features, but it also has an upper that looks more like a daily training upper. So it kind of fits in between these 2 shoes. And this is something you can use for a lot of your workouts and also a lot of easy runs as well. Now, after you're doing all this work, you might need to really take care of yourself, pamper yourself a little bit, go on a recovery run. And from Puma, there's a lot of options, but one that I'm really enjoying is the Mag Max. It has a really double tall stack height of nitro foam that is very squishy, but also peppy at the same time. The upper is really comfortable. The whole thing is very plush. Adds a lot of weight, so it's not exactly a speed shoe. There's a lot of shoe here, but on those days where pace really doesn't matter and you just need to be comfortable and supported to get in the miles, the Mag Max is a really fun option to pull out here. And while I think that this is a pretty solid setup in terms of a 4-shoe rotation from Puma, it's not the only shoes from Puma that you can run in. For example, the Velocity Nitro 3 isn't my favorite daily trainer. I feel like it's a little bit on the firm side for my preferences. And so maybe for someone that isn't as high mileage of a runner or who just likes a little bit more firmness and responsiveness for their shoe, the Velocity might be a great fit. But for me, I think there's an either or situation here. And another shoe that I might put in its place is the Forever Run 2. Now, this is kind of a surprise pick for me because it's kind of a light stability shoe, but I do find that the foams that are in the bottom of the shoe are really comfortable for daily training. They still do have a little bit of pep, but there is a little bit more cushion than I find in the Velocity. And the upper still has the durability, but also comfort that you might want to use for everyday training. So I would probably prefer to have the Forever Run 2 kind of in this daily training spot, although it's kind of on the higher level of cushion than most daily trainers are, but I like that here. And then there is another alternative for the Fast R3. This I've been talking about as being really great for forefoot strikers, but they have another really excellent shoe, the Nitro Elite 3, which was my racing shoe of the year in 2024 because I think it's that good. It's really lightweight. It's got that Nitro Elite foam, the aliphatic TPU that I've been talking about, and it's got a really nice carbon fiber plate. But I think that the geometry of this shoe makes it designed for a different type of runner, a runner who isn't exactly me, although I can run really well in this shoe. And so I feel like these are 2 different options for, I think, 2 different runners. If you're more of a forefoot striker, I think that the Fast R3 is probably the first shoe to look at. But if you're more of a heel striker or just a fast turnover runner, then I feel like the Nitro Elite 3 could be in this race spot. But personally, because I do love stomping on that forefoot, the Fast R3 is the shoe that I would keep in this race spot. And so this is the Puma rotation that I think that I would enjoy most. Now let's wrap up the video by going over the buying guide, and we'll also discuss some of the competition. The Puma Fast R3 is a shoe that feels like it was designed exactly just for me. It took everything that I loved about the Fast R2 and removed every possible distraction for a bit of racing kit that is not only technologically impressive, but also exhilarating to run in. This shoe's coming in at $300 though, and that is a lot of money to pay even for pinnacle race product. Let's take a minute to look at some of the competition that's out there and see the prices where they're coming in. Now, I think the first shoe that most of you are going to be asking about when I'm talking about a shoe that I think is going to be one of the best racing shoes of 2025 you're going to be wanting to know, how does it stack up against the Alphafly 3? Now, this is a shoe that certainly has a wonderful resume. It holds the record for the men and women in the marathon. So it's run some of the fastest times in the world, and pretty much for all the shoes that I'm gonna be talking about today, these are all fantastic shoes that I really don't have that many notes for because they are some of the best shoes that are on the market. But when it comes to comparing these two shoes against each other, there are a lot of similarities, but there are some differences that you might want to be aware of. I feel like the Air Zoom and the Zoom X are an effective team, and certainly we know that those can run fast together, but I feel like there is an extra mechanical nature to the compression and decompression in kind of a not as good of a way for me as I enjoyed in the Alphafly 1, for example. There's a little bit of a disconnect in that decompression, I feel like, and it gives me a bit of a sensation like I'm running across a boxing ring. So like running on top of like suspended plywood where it's kind of bouncing in a slightly janky way. I can move quickly, it feels great, but I feel something artificial underneath me. That's kind of what I get a little bit with the Alphafly 3. Don't get me wrong, it's still a really great shoe, really fun to run fast in, but there is that little kind of hitch in each step that I notice. Plus, I also don't like the way that Nike has been shifting the Air Zoom pockets further back towards the arch. So I feel like for me, and the way my foot hits the ground, I don't really feel like I'm always getting exactly on top of those Air Zoom pods. I feel like I'm kind of landing on the front end of them. I'm missing some of the benefits. That shoe comes in at $285, so $15 cheaper, but kind of basically after you get past like $250, $275, everything's kind of in the really expensive range in my mind, or at least that's how my shopping brain works. You're also going to be paying a little bit more in weight for this shoe, as it comes in at 218 grams and 7.7 ounces. The next shoe that I think we should talk about is a shoe that I think lines up toe-to-toe a little bit better, especially weight-wise, and that's from Asics. This is the Metaspeed Sky. This is the Paris version. This is another shoe that I think is really great for 4-foot stompers like me. It's got a giant landing pad, a launch pad of FF Turbo Plus foam that is nice and squishy and also decompresses nicely, working well in tandem with its carbon fiber plate. Now, I feel like this shoe, again, it's a really great shoe. I've enjoyed racing in it. But if I were to give it some notes, I would say that I think that the FF Turbo Plus foam that they use in this version gives us a little bit more softness at the expense of explosiveness, and late into a race, I'd rather have the explosiveness than the softness, although for long training runs, the softness certainly is really nice. This shoe comes in at a much more reasonable price, a price that I really like for this shoe of $250. And it also comes in at a lighter weight than the Alphafly, kind of splitting the difference almost between the Fast R3 and the AF3. The Metaspeed Sky Paris comes in at 185 grams and 6.5 ounces. So today we've talked about what I think are 3 of some of the best racing shoes on the market right now. 4 if we're also talking about the Nitro Elite 3. Let me know in the comments down below if you have any other questions, or better yet, stop by the live stream that I do Mondays and Thursdays over on the Kofuzi Run Club channel. I'd love to see you guys over there in the chat. That's all for today, everybody. Thanks so much for making it all the way to the end of this video. Hopefully you guys are staying safe out there on your runs, and I will see you in the next one.
Yo, what's going on?